morning. I'm Mrs. Jenkins. In case you don't know, I'm the other government teacher besides Ms. Crawford here at Topeka West. And this is like every 2-year thing. We have candidates come in that are running for political offices, and we have a forum. You guys have introduced some questions for the candidates and my classes as well. And Ms. Crawford and I went through. We covered a variety of broad topic areas because most of your questions kind of grouped under a couple, 3 umbrellas of subject areas. And anyway, we asked them to come in. They've had the questions for a few days now since last Friday. If I'm not correct, last Friday-ish. And they're going to answer those. They're going to introduce themselves as well. And if we have any extra time, you can ask additional questions as we go along. Pretty informal, pretty low-key, but a name and a face in front of the ballots. I brought, in case you need them, some voter registration forms. Anybody need to register to vote today? 7th means, okay, I'll get one to you. We'll get that process started. So, without further ado, you guys would do a coin toss, ABC order. Who wants to speak first? We have Ms. Britani Potter, that is a Democrat running from the 2nd Congressional District in Kansas. She's the Democratic candidate. And then Ms. Lynn Jenkins is running as the Republican candidate. She's running for re-election from the 2nd Congressional District. We have 4 congressional districts. The district we're in the middle of, it goes all the way to the Nebraska border, the Missouri border, and the Oklahoma border. And it covers basically a thin slice on the eastern side of the state. Okay, you guys, if you haven't talked about it in class, I'm sure you will, because that's what we do here. Any ready? A coin toss, ABC order?
She can go first.
Ms. Potter?
Okay.
All right, Ms. Potter. Let's give her a Topeka West welcome.
Hello. I'm going to stand here because I'm short, and this will basically block me from being able to see any of you. So, my name is Britani Potter, and as she mentioned, I'm the candidate running on the Democratic ticket. I want to go ahead and we'll just say I'm not a two-party system kind of person. I have always been an unaffiliated voter, and I'm not a fan of the Republican versus Democrat. We have seen the gridlock that causes in Washington, and I believe that it is detrimental to the people of the United States and to Kansans. However, that's the system that we live in right now, and so I'm running as a Democrat on this ticket. That is something that I'm hoping to spur a conversation about going forward. I want to thank all of you guys for taking some time to come and listen to us. I think getting involved at a young age is critical. We've had some discussions lately about how many of you have a job. So you're paying taxes. And you've probably had that job even before you were 18. I know I did. I was working at 14 and really 12 before that, but paying taxes and everything as of 14 and not working for my family anymore. You can't vote. So taxation without representation, something to consider. Maybe we need to have a conversation about how many under 18 employees are working without being able to have a say in our democracy. It's just something that had come up recently that I thought was worth having a conversation about. So that's something that I plan to address. The other thing is you have to exercise your right to vote. You have to go ahead, register to vote, and then show up on election day and cast your ballot. I know that it can feel like it's meaningless sometimes. I've been in that position, but I'm tired of feeling that way. And so I have stepped up and decided to run as someone who works hard every day, who is not wealthy, was not born into privilege, does not have wealthy friends, and I'm not taking special interest money. So I am just a person like all of you. I have 3 kids, I have a husband, I serve on the school board, and I'm tired of the corruption in our government, and I'm tired of feeling helpless and watching the gap expand while the wealthiest people and the businesses are getting all of the breaks and all the rest of us are having to deal with the repercussions of that. So, I'm here to be your voice. I want to speak for those of us who have gone unheard for far too long. I represent everyone. I don't care what party affiliation you have. To me, our government isn't Republican versus Democrat. Our government is what is in the best interest of the people. We are here to serve the people. That's what we're elected to do, and we need to put people before politics. So I'm excited to talk with you guys, and I love the questions that you guys have given us. And I would be happy to talk with you anytime. I try to be very available, and you can reach me on Facebook, Twitter, email, by phone, whatever's the most convenient for you. Please, I want to hear from you, and ultimately, you guys are why I'm doing this and why we need to change our current situation in Kansas and in Washington. So, thank you.
And good morning, I'm Lynn Jenkins, and I too want to thank you all for taking time out of your schedule to come listen to this forum. I think it is so important that young people engage and be involved in the political process and in government, and that's what you're doing here today. A little bit about myself. I grew up 30 miles north of here on a dairy farm in Holton, Kansas, if any of you know Holton. We milked 100 head of Holstein cattle every morning at 4 o'clock and every afternoon at 4 o'clock. I went to K-State, studied accounting and economics. I have 2 kids. They're all grown. My daughter Haley is a physician assistant here in town, and she is married to her new husband as of May 27th. She works as a physician assistant at the health department, helping folks who don't have any health insurance or can't afford it. And my baby is a senior at Baker University, if any of you know Baker, south of Douglas County. He plays football. He's kind of majoring in football with a minor in the fraternity and girls. And I hope that at the end of this year, he has some marketable skills. He thinks he wants to be a coach. So we'll see how Hayden does. They're number 2 in the nation, their football team, so we're very proud of my little baby, Hayden. I practiced public accounting on the tax side of things for about the first 2 decades of my professional life. And then I was recruited to run for public service. I'm not going to do public service for the rest of my life. I've probably got a few more good years left in me, but I'll return to public accounting because I think it's a great profession. I originally ran for the State House, so I represented this area in the State House for 2 years. Then I was recruited to run for the State Senate, again representing this area, and probably most of you. And I spent 2 years over there. And then our state treasurer moved on to run for governor. And I was only one of 2 CPAs in the entire state house, and everyone thought it might be a good idea if somebody that knew something about accounting and numbers be our state treasurer. So I was recruited to run for state treasurer. I won 2 elections there. And then I just became frustrated with what I saw going on in Washington. And so that's when I decided to run for Congress. And I've been there the last few years. It's been a fascinating job. It's really made up of 2 parts as I see it. One part, half of the job is casework. So if you that are paying taxes have trouble filing your tax return and you can't get the IRS to respond to you, they're ignoring your phone calls, they won't respond to your emails, you can call our office. And that's about what half of our staff does every day, is they go to bat for Kansans. And I love that part because that is totally nonpartisan. I don't care, Republican, Democrat, whatever you are, we're your advocate and we're going to go through the wall for you. So we've had some really cool stories. I could talk all day about the success stories and the just heartwarming stories that we have from our casework. One woman was declared dead by the Social Security Administration, and she stopped receiving her Social Security checks, so she had no way to pay her rent or her bills or anything. And so we breathed new life back into her, got a hold of the Social Security Administration, brought her back to life. That was kind of fun. Just recently we had a widow that was receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars of bills. Her husband was a veteran, and his health care was supposed to be covered by the Veterans Administration, and yet they had the paperwork all wrong, and she couldn't seem to get it sorted out. And that was one where everyone was crying by the time that case was closed, because we were able to save her from like $350,000 in medical expenses that were never intended for her to pay. And she had already lost her spouse. So that's half of the job. And then the other half is in Washington, where we do public policy. And so about 4 days a week, I fly to DC and I do my work there. And then I'm home every weekend so I can listen to folks like you, find out what your priorities are, find out what your challenges are. So next Monday morning, I know what to focus on when I get back to DC. We had a tough start when I was first elected. I was in the minority. The Democrats had the Oval Office. They had control of the House, and they had 60 votes in the Senate. So if you've had your government, you understand the significance of the 60 votes and how you can just run the tables. You can break through any filibuster. That was a tough 2 years. As the minority party, we were literally physically locked out of a committee room one day. Our view was not necessary, and it was a sad, sad time for the people of Kansas and the folks that I represented. And then the pendulum, we took back control of the House, and those folks that came in that year were sent with a mandate to just shut that place down and not to let any more bad legislation pass. And so it became gridlock for a couple years. But we've been able to find kind of a happy place the last couple years and break through that gridlock. Part of it was in response to a group that I helped launch. It was called the No Labels Problem Solvers Caucus. And what we did is we realized there was this gap between the two parties and no one was talking to one another. And we needed to build a bridge. And so we visited with some folks that had been there in times past when the process worked. Bob Dole is one of my good friends and a good mentor. You probably are too young to even remember when Bob Dole served Kansas as the United States Senator. He ran for president. He's just a good soul. And he tells me of a time when people would move their families to Washington and they would live there together. And so people of opposite parties got to know one another as human beings, not just as the majority or the minority party. They went to church together. Their kids went to school together. They socialized together. And so they were able to communicate better. Well, that's not the model today. I'm expected to be home in my district at the Dillon store or Hy-Vee on the weekends. So no one does that really anymore. And so what we did is we formed this group. It started with just maybe under 20 of us, and we've grown to over 100. And it's not rocket science. We simply have breakfast together at least a couple times a month and dinners occasionally. And it's half Republicans, half Democrats. We have the independent. It's part senators, part members of the House. And I think it's thanks to the work that we've done to try to get to know each other and find common ground that we've been able to pass significant legislation here in the last few years and keep the train on the track with no talk of shutdowns or, stalling the government. And so I feel like we really have finally found a way to move forward in a divided government, which is what we have right now. And so looking forward to your questions. I agree with Ms. Potter. You all need to vote, and I hope those of you that are old enough will fill out that form, get registered, vote, and those of you that aren't will do so the minute that you can. So I look forward to your questions.
We have a list of 4 questions from all of you and the other students in the government classes. And the first one is several students are concerned about the expense of college. And they're wanting to know how the federal government can help make a college education more attainable for Kansans. So that's the question posed to both of you. Once you're in Congress, what can you do to help us out?
Do you want me to go first?
Sure, yeah, we'll rotate.
Okay. Cost of college. No one understands better than me about that right now. Haley just graduated in May, and Hayden's in the midst of it. It's ridiculous, the cost and the debt that the American people are going into sending their kids to school. And education is the key. It's a great equalizer. If you want to do well in life, you need to go on to school, go to VOTEC, get an associate's degree, whatever you have to do, find some skill sets and pursue them with passion. When I got to Washington, I started right away on writing some legislation that could help kids and their families continue their education after the high school years, and focused my attention predominantly on the 529 college savings programs. Education is the chief function of the state government. So when I was in the State House, K through 12 is by far the largest piece of the budget. Higher education is probably one of the next highest. And so what you don't want is the federal government from on high thinking the genius of America lies in Washington, and we'll just tell states and local communities how to educate folks and how to send kids to college. But I think there is a role for the federal government to play, and it is through the tax code. And so we wrote legislation that would expand the 529 plan. That refers to the code section in the tax code that allows families, parents, grandparents, your neighbors, your friends, your employer, to be able to contribute to a savings plan from before the time you're born up until the time you die. These things never age out. And it grows, you get a tax benefit for contributing, so that's the incentive, is you not only get to save for a kid to go to college, but it grows tax-free if it's used for the purpose that it is saved for. And just yesterday, I was in, where was I at? Southeast Kansas in Coffeyville, and I had this random man stop me and say, thank you for your work on 529s. That's how I'm sending my kid onto VOTEC school next year. They are a huge success, and what we were able to do is the president, I think, made a miscalculation at the beginning of this past, a year ago. He proposed that we start taxing these things and basically unravel them. And so it was the perfect timing for me to step to the mic and say, that's wrong, Mr. President. The right way is to expand them and then make them more user-friendly. And so we can get more families helping to save, to send their kids to school. And so we had broad bipartisan support for that. Everyone jumped on board. We passed that. The president even signed the bill into law and became a fan of expanding 529. So that's one thing. The other thing is we can equip you to be ready for college here in a place like Topeka West. And I think, again, you don't want the federal government doing that. And so another thing that we were able to get signed into law this year was a repeal of the No Child Left Behind bill. That was something that had passed a long time ago. I think it was well-intentioned, but we heard from educators and administrators that they were being asked to teach you all to a test rather than teach you what you need to be successful in the world. And so they were asking that it be repealed. And so we were able to, again, with bipartisan support, repeal that and let the folks that know what you need to know teach you that and get the federal government out of the way.
Okay, so, wonderful question. I would argue that I might know firsthand as much as Congresswoman Jenkins on this, as I have $35,000 worth of student debt because I grew up poor and my parents didn't have the money to save for my college because we were busy trying to pay our bills and feed ourselves. I don't know what I'll do for my own children because, again, I've been in that gap my entire adult life, unable to make it. When the cost of living in the 2nd Congressional District is about $49,000 is the median household income, but the cost of living is $55,000 to $65,000 depending on where you live, the math doesn't work. It doesn't matter how good at numbers you are. I am about to finish my master's degree in family financial planning. I have 3 associate's degrees and a bachelor's degree. I was able to get by on some grants and scholarships in the beginning. Otherwise, I would probably have closer to $60,000 or $80,000 in student loan debt. Some of that was by circumstance. I happen to have a baby in high school. Don't recommend it. Not the best path to take. But in a way, because of that, I was able to qualify for additional help when it came to college that I wouldn't have been able to have. And so my peers with the same level of education as me have quite a bit more student debt. My interest rates on my student debt are higher than my mortgage or my car payments interest rates. That's absolutely disgusting. That is something that can be changed in Congress by the federal government. We can fix this issue. Education is so important, and it is so important to me. That's why I serve on the school board where I live in Ottawa. That's why our school district, and I was so excited to be able to vote for this on the board. We have actually started a program called the C3 Initiative, where our high school students will be able to graduate high school with an associate's degree, having paid relatively nothing. I believe they settled on $20 a class, and they're partnering with the community college in town. And so you could be able to enter the workforce immediately with a trade or an associate's degree, should you choose to go that route, at very little cost. We have a high free and reduced lunch rate in our district, so that means we have a lot of people that are in low socioeconomic status, and that means that the opportunities for them are very limited. I can appreciate the work that Congresswoman Jenkins has done on the 529 plans. However, they still place a significant burden on families. And again, when your cost of living is $10,000 more a year than you're making, doesn't matter what kind of tax breaks you're going to get for saving in 529 plan, because you're not going to have money to put into it anyways. So it's a Band-Aid basically on a hemorrhaging wound that is our education system in this country. So we can fix this, and it really would not be that costly if we fixed our IRS code so that corporations didn't get the tax advantages that they currently do and couldn't find loopholes, so that people like Donald Trump couldn't lose almost $1 billion and not pay taxes potentially for the last 20 years. Things like that could have paid for a lot of people's education. We're not one, if not the only industrialized nation who doesn't provide higher education. And it's contributing to the generational poverty that we see. The cycle of poverty can't be broken if we aren't willing to invest in people. So my suggestion is that we start to look at government as how can we invest in the people that we serve. And when we start to do that, we will see a drastic change, and the return on that investment will be astronomical. You will see lower criminal justice expense. You'll see better quality of life. You'll have a stronger middle class. We could even eliminate poverty if we would just change the way that we look at things and truly invest in you guys. And that's where our priority needs to be. We will have a much stronger workforce, and we will be more competitive in a global economy if we have higher education. we also need to adjust how we look at education. Right now, there's still too much emphasis on testing and trying to determine if you've met whatever memorization that you need to meet to be able to test well. We need practical abilities, we need analytical skills, we need critical thinking. These are all things that we're seeing start to change. The mentality of education is headed in a really positive direction, in my opinion, and it's critical that we make sure that we have local control when it comes to that. As a school board member, I very much appreciate the ability to determine what is in the best needs of our district, because like I said, we have a high free and reduced lunch rate, but other districts may not, or they may have more, or they may have a different population. Demographics are going to be different. And the same thing goes for higher education. They have boards of regents, and they need to be able to set policies and determine what direction they want to go. But that is separate from financing and being able to afford it, and that's where the government's role is trying to make sure that we have equal opportunity no matter what background you come from. And if you fall within that gap, we have to close that gap. We can't have people who make too much money to get grants and scholarships and things like that, and not enough money to actually be able to put money into these types of savings accounts. So there's a lot of work to be done, but it absolutely can be done, and that's something that I will fight very hard for, because I know it's my kids' future that's on the line. I don't want them leaving school with massive amounts of debt. I honestly don't know how or when I will ever pay off my debt, because the interest rate is higher than some credit cards even. I mean, that's bad. That's really, really bad. And it's compounding every day, and I make a payment every month, and it's not even covering the interest that this is earning while I'm still in school. And I don't even have to be making payments right now, but I don't even want to think about how bad it would be if I wasn't. So that is the reality. I understand that reality firsthand, and I think we need to change that reality so that you guys can have the best possible future, and so that this country can have the best possible workforce. I want to see happy citizens in Kansas, and I want to see well-educated, hardworking, and rewarded citizens in the state of Kansas.
With our second question, I'm going to propose the answers. Can we shorten the answers a little bit and move on? Okay. Second question from the students. How do you propose to balance public safety with an individual's Second Amendment right to carry a firearm? So it's public safety versus Second Amendment issues. And that's what the students are concerned about.
So this is one of those areas where we have to seek balance. I fully support the Second Amendment. If you want to own a gun and you are a law-abiding, legal citizen of this country, by all means, own a gun. But with rights come responsibilities, and you have a responsibility as a gun owner to know what you're doing, to treat that weapon with the respect that it deserves, because it can do a lot of damage. We have to do something about the accessibility of guns when it comes to non-law abiding citizens. And recent polls show that 90% of Americans favor this. However, the NRA and other special interest groups do not, and they contribute large amounts of money to campaigns. Even Congresswoman Jenkins has taken money from that. So they are basically paying our congressional representatives to do nothing on the issue of gun safety, because quite honestly, they don't care whether or not people die. They just want to be able to sell as much as they possibly can and make as much profit as possible. We need to stand up and say, hey, there's a reasonable, rational solution to this without doing anything to anyone's Second Amendment right. We have a no-fly list that Congresswoman Jenkins says is inaccurate. Well, then fix it. That shouldn't be inaccurate. That's an important list. I wouldn't want people on the no-fly list to be able to purchase weapons, but right now they still can. And to use that as a defense and to throw your hands up in the air and say, well, it's broken, there's nothing we can do, that's not an excuse. So, I'd like to see some actual action be taken, and if there's an issue with the no-fly list, fix it. If there's an issue with something else, fix it. But we have to get representation that won't continue to work for their special interest donors and will actually work on behalf of us. So that's where I stand.
I support the Second Amendment. The Constitution gives everyone the right to own and carry a weapon. And I think what's dangerous is to make a statement that people don't care whether they die. I would be careful saying that. I'm not sure I know many other than terrorists that want to seek Americans' death, any American to make that statement. I think that's terribly dangerous. How I have tried to address this issue is by taking a look at all of the shootings that we've had here as of late. And the one common thread that runs through all of them is that you have a mentally ill person who has got access to a weapon and has hurt other people. And so my focus has been for years on addressing this issue of helping folks with mental illness. And it's not something I've just recently come to the table on. For 20 years I've served on, 20 years ago I think I started serving on the local community health center board, helping folks right here in our community. I got so involved I ran for a national office with that association and served the surrounding states. And all of this was volunteer, then served as the treasurer of that National Association for Mental Illness for several years. When I got to Congress, it became a policy area that I focused on. And after years of working on legislation with folks across the aisle within my own party, I'm so relieved that we're going to get a bill passed into law this year. The bill that I authored will be part of that. It just passed the House unanimously a couple weeks ago, and there's been similar legislation in the Senate, so there shouldn't be much to reconcile to get it to the President in short order. And what it does is it provides grant money to local communities to help educate folks on the front lines to recognize when someone is suffering from a mental illness, so we can get them help before they would hurt themselves or somebody else. And those grant funds would go to teach people like the men and women in the room, that your teachers, your administrators, police force that are on the streets dealing with this every day, veterans, folks that work over at the Veterans Administration. If we can get to folks that are suffering from mental illness, then we will put a stop to all this needless gun violence.
Thank you. Our third question from the students is about illegal immigration. Do you have plans to minimize the impact of illegal immigration? And that's question number 3.
Yes, this is a big issue, especially here in Kansas. I don't go many places in the 25 counties that I represent that I don't hear about this issue. And it was unfortunate just a few weeks ago we read where 1,800 people who were to be set to be deported accidentally got naturalized. That's the kind of thing that causes the American people to lose confidence in the president and his administration, and we deserve better. And so we have been working in the House to put forward a proposal. We've got several working their ways through the process. The initial step, and I believe it is a step-by-step approach. I don't think you can just pass a comprehensive immigration bill that's going to fix everything. There'd be too much in it, and it would end up being a massive bill that no one would understand. But we have a broken legal immigration system and a broken illegal immigration system. So the first thing would be to address the illegal immigration situation and secure the border and kind of stop the hemorrhaging. And why this is so important is it's a national security issue. We don't know who's coming across, so we just shut off the border, and then we know, who's coming in and out of our country. And then the other thing is to address sanctuary cities. And this is an issue that, again, we passed legislation on because I think it brought to the forefront recently when there was a murder of a young woman out in San Francisco. Do you remember that? And it was by someone who was set to be deported several times and never was deported because they reside in a sanctuary city. That's a city that chooses to ignore federal law and become a magnet, if you will, for folks who are not in this country legally. We're a country that is welcoming to immigrants. We want people to come here. We want them to do it legally. And we need to fix the laws to make sure that that can happen. And then we need to take care of the borders and go about, sending the folks that are in our prisons that aren't here legally home. It's something that we can do and we must do.
So there's a lot of misunderstanding and poor information out there about immigration and the issues and things like that. It's important to remember that a lot of our illegal immigrants have American citizens within their families, and mass deportation or any type of deportation can break up families, and that's unfortunate. If they're law-abiding citizens, then we need to find a way to make sure that they become citizens through a legal means. And if they are breaking the laws, then they shouldn't be here. And biggest issue is Congress likes to talk about how they're going to fix immigration and they're going to do all these things, but they don't want to fund it. And without the funding, that's where we've ended up in some problems. So, we need to take a look at that and determine how much money we want to spend in that area and then adequately fund it for what we're trying to do. This isn't an issue of people just running across the border. We have a lot of people here that are just on expired visas, that they flew in on a plane, and no amount of Border Patrol is going to help get them out if they just overstayed their visa. The numbers don't match up to what Congress is willing to pay, so they need to pick their battles, in my opinion. We have to find a way to better allocate our resources and our tax revenue so that we can fight the problems that need to be fought and stop wasting money on issues that aren't issues. So, there are things that we can do, there are things that we need to do, but overall this is a topic that I think gets blown out of proportion pretty drastically. And it is something, I grew up in Arizona for the first 12 years of my life, and I still have family who live there. I understand immigration issues, and I've seen some of the problems that can be created, but I've also seen some wonderful people who are just trying to make a better life for themselves. So, we can fix this, but we have to truly take a look at the root of the problem, and Congress has been unwilling to do that.
Thank you very much. That was the delegate in our class today, our class period. Do you have any questions or comments for our candidates? I thank you very much for your time.